The sound of clinking glasses filled the air, but it wasn't enough to drown out the tension hanging like a thick cloud over the room. The night was supposed to be a celebration, but something felt off. Ariana Wilson stood at the far side of the room, her gaze locked on the swirling glasses of champagne in her hand, pretending not to notice the whispers. She knew what they were saying. They always said it when she was near. It had been a year since she'd married David Harrison, a man she loved more than anything in this world. But his world, his family, was a different story. A world of power, privilege, and inherited wealth. A world where Ariana, despite her own success in building a tech empire, would never truly belong. She heard the murmur. She's just after his money. What else could it be? It wasn't just a thought. It was a belief, a constant undercurrent that no one dared to voice aloud, until tonight. Until Eleanor Harrison, David's mother, had decided that enough was enough. Let's address the elephant in the room, shall we? Eleanor's voice cut through the chatter, sharp and unyielding, like a knife slicing through the still air. All heads turned toward her. Ariana's pulse quickened. She'd known this moment was coming. She had always known. Eleanor stood in the center of the room, her piercing eyes fixed on Ariana. The glimmer of the chandelier bounced off her diamonds, making her presence even more imposing. She was the matriarch, the unchallenged queen of this family, and she had ruled with an iron fist for decades. Everyone, Eleanor began, her voice dripping with sweetness that only made it more venomous, I'm sure you're all wondering how a woman with such humble beginnings managed to land a man like David. After all, it's not every day someone from her background gets such an opportunity. She paused, allowing the room to fall into an almost suffocating silence. We can't help but wonder, is she really in love with him? Or is she simply playing a game? The weight of her words landed hard. Ariana felt the color drain from her face. The room went eerily quiet, the weight of the accusation heavier than anything she had ever felt. She wasn't just an outsider anymore. Now, she was a target. Eleanor, David's voice finally broke the tension, his eyes wide with disbelief. What are you doing? Eleanor didn't even glance at him, her gaze locked on Ariana like a predator sizing up its prey. I'm speaking the truth, David. You've been blinded by her charm, by her ambition. But everyone here knows what she's really after. Ariana felt her stomach twist. The words stung, but they weren't new. They never were. She had faced these judgments for as long as she could remember. But tonight, it was different. Tonight, Eleanor wasn't just making subtle jabs. She was making it clear that this would be the end. The end of everything Ariana had worked so hard for. The end of her place in David's world. She could feel the eyes of the entire room on her. The whispers. The judgment. It was suffocating. Ariana took a deep breath. She wasn't going to let this moment break her. Not tonight. Not here. With a measured calmness, she set her glass down on the table, the sound of it clinking against the crystal almost deafening. She stood up, her hand trembling only slightly as she smoothed down the front of her dress. Her heart raced, but she refused to let it show. Eleanor, Ariana said, her voice surprisingly steady. If you think I married your son for his money, then you don't know me at all. She could feel the room shift, the murmurs that had stopped briefly beginning again. But she wasn't done. I've built my own empire, Eleanor. I didn't need David's wealth to succeed. I didn't need anyone's approval to become who I am today. She turned toward David, her eyes meeting his for the first time since the tirade began. I love him, and I thought you would respect that. But now I see that I was wrong. There was a flicker of uncertainty in David's eyes, but Ariana didn't wait for him to respond. She knew what she had to do. I'm done, she said, her voice thick with resolve. I don't need to prove myself to anyone. Least of all you. With that, Ariana turned on her heel and walked out of the room. The silence that followed was deafening. But it didn't matter. She had done what she needed to do. She had stood up for herself. As she walked down the long, dark hallway toward the door, Ariana could hear the murmurs behind her. She didn't look back. She wouldn't. And yet, just as she was about to step outside into the cool night air, she heard footsteps behind her. Footsteps that were too familiar to ignore. Ariana, David's voice, low and filled with emotion, called out to her. She stopped but didn't turn around. She couldn't. I should have stopped her, David said, his voice breaking. I should have said something. Ariana closed her eyes, fighting the wave of anger and betrayal that threatened to drown her. Yes, David, she whispered, finally turning to face him. You should have. This was just the beginning. The storm had only begun to gather. The next few days felt like a blur. Ariana couldn't escape the scenes of that night, the sound of Eleanor's voice echoing in her mind. She didn't know what hurt more, the words that were spoken, or the realization that David hadn't been strong enough to stand by her. She didn't expect him to understand the weight of the world she carried on her shoulders, but she had hoped he would. At least, she thought he might try harder. Instead, he had stood there, silent, as his mother humiliated her in front of everyone. Ariana wasn't the type to back down. She'd built her career on standing firm in the face of adversity. But now, the walls that had once been her armor seemed to be closing in on her. She sat at her desk, staring at her computer screen. The emails piled up, the meetings stacked high. But today, nothing felt like it mattered. She clicked through her calendar, her mind distant. The silence in her office was almost deafening. Ariana had worked so hard to build her tech company, to prove that she could succeed in a world that wasn't always kind to women, let alone women from humble beginnings. But now, she felt like a failure. She wasn't just fighting for business deals. She was fighting for her own worth. Her phone buzzed. David. She let it ring, then turned it off. She wasn't ready for him yet. Not after what had happened. Ariana, please. It was the same message again, one he'd left this morning, and the morning before that. But words alone wouldn't fix this. She knew that now. He had let her down in the most significant way possible. The door to her office opened without warning. Ariana looked up, startled. David, she sighed, her shoulders tensing. I don't think we're ready to talk yet. I know, he said, voice soft, but persistent. But we need to. I need to apologize. Please. He closed the door behind him, stepping closer. The intensity in his gaze made her heart ache. She met his eyes, trying to mask the hurt that she could feel seeping through her defenses. You had your chance to apologize, David. You had your chance to stand up for me. I didn't know what to do, David admitted, his voice tight with frustration. I've never had to choose between my wife and my family like this. Well, you've made your choice, Ariana replied, her voice thick with emotion. You didn't choose me. You chose your family over and over again, even when you knew what was happening. I needed you, David. And you stood there. David's face tightened, his expression filled with regret. I was afraid. Afraid of losing everything. But I shouldn't have been. You were right. I should have stood up for you, for us. Ariana didn't know what hurt more, the anger she felt in her chest or the fact that he was still unsure. Still afraid. I don't need your apology, she said, standing up and walking over to the window. The city below was alive with movement, but here, in this moment, everything felt frozen. I need you to choose. I need you to choose me over them. And until you do, I can't do this anymore. David took a step forward, but she held up her hand, stopping him. Give me time, Ariana, he pleaded. I promise, I'll fix this. I'll make it right. I don't know if you can, she replied quietly, her voice wavering slightly. But I can't keep waiting for someone who's too scared to fight for me. You have to decide who you want to be. And until then, I can't do this. David didn't say anything. He just stood there, watching her. The silence between them felt like a vast chasm. Ariana's phone buzzed again. She stared at the screen, then turned it off without answering. It had been days since she'd spoken to David. The silence between them was deafening, and Ariana wasn't sure if it was because of him or because of the weight of everything that had happened. She had always prided herself on being independent, but this was something else entirely. Her company had been thriving, but lately, it felt like everything was crumbling. The deals she had worked so hard to secure were slipping through her fingers, one by one. A new competitor had entered the market with a groundbreaking tech innovation, and Ariana's investors were beginning to second-guess her leadership. She walked into the boardroom, where a tense atmosphere greeted her. Her team, once a tight-knit group of innovators, now looked uneasy. Their eyes avoided hers, and Ariana knew that they had begun to lose faith in her. Ariana, Greg, her head of development, said hesitantly. We've been running into some problems with the project. There's a gap in the code we haven't been able to bridge. And, honestly, I'm not sure we can meet the deadline. Ariana didn't say anything for a long moment. She didn't have to look at the code to know what was wrong. She'd known for weeks that something wasn't right. She'd felt it deep in her gut, but there were other things she'd been too focused on. Other things that had distracted her. We'll find a solution, she said, her voice calm but determined. We don't back down from challenges. We'll work through it. Just, get it to me by tomorrow. The meeting ended quickly after that, and Ariana stayed behind, pacing the floor of the empty room. Her mind raced, filled with 1,000 thoughts. She had built everything she had from nothing. She wasn't about to let one mistake, one setback, ruin everything. But the pressure of it all was starting to take its toll. Then, as if on cue, her phone buzzed again. It was from David. I've made a decision. Her heart sank. She didn't want to read it. But she couldn't help herself. I'm ready to stand by you, Ariana. I'm ready to fight for us. Please, let me prove it to you. She stared at the words, her emotions a whirlwind. This was it. This was the moment. The moment she had been waiting for, but at what cost? Was it too little, too late? Ariana stood in front of her office window, looking out at the bustling city below. She was done waiting. Done hoping that things would fall into place. The world was moving on, and Ariana had spent too much time caught in her own confusion. It was time to act. She had built her company on the values of resilience, innovation, and the ability to adapt. She knew that she couldn't afford to let her personal life spill over into her work anymore. She had to make a decision. She had to choose what mattered most. Her phone buzzed once more, but this time, she didn't hesitate. She opened the message from David, reading it once again, allowing his words to sink in. But as much as she wanted to believe him, Ariana knew that the most important thing was her own vision. Her own fight. I've made my choice, she whispered to herself, making her way toward her desk. She didn't have the answers yet, but she would find them. For her company. For herself. The story wasn't over. This was just the beginning. It was just after lunch when Ariana received the call that would change everything. Ms. Wilson, the voice on the other end was unfamiliar, but the urgency in it made her sit up straighter. We need you in the office. There's something you need to see. It's about the funding. A cold knot formed in her stomach as she grabbed her coat and rushed out the door. She had been trying to avoid the inevitable, another setback, another battle with the investors, who were growing increasingly frustrated with her delayed projects. But now, something told her this wasn't just a delay. This was something much bigger. When Ariana arrived at her office, Greg and Claire, her right-hand executives, were already waiting for her. Greg's face was tense, and Claire looked pale. What happened? Ariana asked, her heart pounding in her chest. Greg hesitated before speaking. It's the grant application we submitted to the Silicon Valley Consortium. It's been pulled. Ariana's breath caught in her throat. Pulled. Without warning? Claire nodded grimly. There's a memo going around saying the project's unsuitable. It's coming from the consortium's board. They've sent us a rejection letter, but it's more than just that. She pushed a thick envelope toward Ariana. Ariana ripped it open, her eyes scanning the document quickly. The words, high risk, financial instability, and lack of innovation, stood out, followed by a list of concerns she knew weren't valid. This isn't just a rejection, Ariana muttered, her fingers trembling. Someone's sabotaging us. Greg stepped forward. We think it's someone on the inside. The problem is, there's no clear trail. The board didn't even give us a reason beyond vague statements. Ariana's mind raced, each word she read digging deeper into the pit in her stomach. It was hard to believe that after all the hard work they'd put into this proposal, someone would intentionally try to derail them. But who would do such a thing? Who could have that much power? And then it hit her. Eleanor, she whispered. Greg and Claire exchanged uncertain glances. You think she's behind this? I don't know, Ariana replied, her voice low but firm. But this doesn't just feel like a coincidence. This has all the signs of someone deliberately trying to destroy us. Her gaze hardened. And I'm not going to let that happen. Ariana spent the next few hours diving into the investigation, poring over emails, memos, and financial reports. The more she dug, the more the pieces began to fit together. She knew there had to be something, some kind of evidence, that would prove her suspicions right. It wasn't long before she found it, a series of email threads between Eleanor and a former partner of hers in the tech world. It was clear that someone had been pushing for a competing deal that could directly affect Ariana's company. Ariana took a deep breath. This was bigger than just business. This was personal. She knew that exposing Eleanor would not only ruin any chance of reconciliation with David's family but also shake the foundation of everything she'd worked so hard to build. Still, she had no choice. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about standing her ground and showing the world that she wouldn't back down. Not to Eleanor. Not to anyone. She forwarded the emails to her lawyer, James, who immediately got to work drafting a legal response. It was time to fight back. Ariana wasn't going to let anyone take her down without a fight. But as she prepared for battle, another thought lingered in her mind. Would David stand by her side when the truth came out? Or would he choose to protect his mother again? David had been calling, texting, leaving voice messages. But Ariana hadn't responded. Not yet. Not until she was sure of what she was going to do. The next evening, at a family dinner that Ariana had been reluctantly invited to, the truth was finally laid bare. Eleanor was already seated at the head of the table, her icy glare fixed on Ariana as she walked in. David stood beside her, looking increasingly uncomfortable. Sit down, Ariana, Eleanor said, her voice sharp, her smile forced. We've been waiting for you. Ariana didn't bother with pleasantries. She sat down, met her mother-in-law's gaze, and didn't blink. There was no room for fear anymore. Not after everything that had happened. I know what you've been doing, Ariana said, her voice calm but unwavering. I have the evidence. Eleanor's smile faltered, and David stiffened. Ariana. Don't, she cut him off, her eyes never leaving Eleanor. I know about the emails. The sabotage. The attempt to undermine my business. The room went silent. The tension was thick enough to slice through with a knife. Eleanor's face flushed a deep shade of red. You have no proof of anything, Ariana. You're just making baseless accusations. I have more than enough proof, Ariana said, pulling out her phone and sliding it across the table toward David. Read the emails. Look at the memo. I didn't come here to accuse you. I came here to show you what you've done. David stared at the phone, the color draining from his face as he scrolled through the evidence. His eyes flicked up to Eleanor, then back down to the phone in his hands. You knew about this? Ariana asked, her voice barely above a whisper. David didn't answer immediately. He was frozen. David, Eleanor said, her voice now a desperate plea, this isn't what it looks like. I was just protecting our family. No, David interrupted, his voice hoarse. You were trying to destroy her. You've been trying to destroy everything she's worked for. And I've let you. I've stood by, letting you manipulate everything. But not anymore. I'm done. Eleanor's face contorted with fury. You would choose her over me? David didn't hesitate. Yes. I choose Ariana. Every time. Ariana's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't sure what to feel. Shock. Relief. Fury. She had never thought David would actually make a stand. Not like this. Not in front of his family. The room was still, silent, as Eleanor sat back, defeated. The next morning, Ariana stood in her office, reviewing the legal documents her lawyer had prepared. The emails had been sent to the board, to the investors, and to her competitors. Everyone knew the truth now. She had fought back, and won. But winning came at a price. David had spent the night at his mother's house. He hadn't called. He hadn't texted. He hadn't said a word since the dinner. Ariana knew that everything had changed. She had exposed Eleanor for what she was, but now she had to deal with the fallout. She couldn't control what happened next. But she could control how she responded. She would continue building her empire. She would continue fighting for her dreams, no matter what. And as she looked out the window, the city stretching before her, Ariana made a promise to herself. No one, not even David, could stand in her way now. The days after the dinner were a blur. Ariana's decision to confront Eleanor had left ripples, and though the dust had settled somewhat, the undercurrent of tension still lingered. David had promised to make things right, but each day without hearing from him felt like a weight she couldn't shake. The business side of things was no easier. With the recent sabotage uncovered, the investors had turned their attention back to Ariana's company, some of them questioning her ability to recover. The competition had gotten fiercer, and every day seemed like a new battle. But Ariana was determined to push through. She had worked too hard to let this setback define her. It was late afternoon when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. David. Can we talk? A familiar wave of anxiety swept over her. She wasn't sure if she was ready for this conversation. The last time they spoke, things were left unresolved. But deep down, she knew she couldn't avoid it forever. Ariana stood, grabbed her coat, and headed out of her office. The silence between them when she walked into the cafe was palpable. David sat at a table near the window, his face strained, his posture tense. He stood as she approached, but they didn't embrace. Neither of them seemed sure of how to begin. Thanks for meeting me, David said, his voice soft. He motioned to the chair across from him. Please, sit. Ariana sat down but didn't speak right away. She let the silence linger, as if giving him a chance to find the right words. David exhaled slowly. I've been thinking a lot. About everything that happened. And I need to say I'm sorry. Not just for not standing up for you in that moment, but for allowing my family to treat you the way they have. Ariana nodded, her gaze steady but distant. David, I've heard the apology before, and I don't think it matters anymore. The truth is, you've been too afraid of your family for too long. You've let them control you, and in doing so, you've been controlling me too. David's face tightened with guilt. I never wanted to control you. You know that. Maybe not directly, Ariana responded, her voice growing more composed. But you allowed them to control how we lived. How we were treated. And I allowed it because I thought love would be enough. But it wasn't. Ariana's words hung in the air between them, cutting through the tension that had built over the past few weeks. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even disappointed anymore. She was just tired. Tired of waiting for things to change. Where does that leave us? David finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ariana took a deep breath. I don't know. I've spent so much time trying to prove myself to everyone, trying to make this work, that I forgot to ask myself what I really want. And right now, I need to focus on myself. On my company. On my future. David looked crushed. Ariana, please don't do this. We can fix this. We can make it right. Ariana shook her head. I don't know if we can. Maybe you can fix things with your family, but right now, I need to fix me. I need to take back control of my life. David didn't argue, though it was clear he wanted to. He just sat back, watching her, as if finally seeing the person she had become. The silence stretched on, and for the first time, Ariana felt a sense of peace. She had made the decision, and now she had to stick with it. She could no longer put her dreams on hold for anyone, not even for David. Ariana threw herself back into work. She had always been a driven person, but now, there was something different in her focus. She wasn't just fighting for success, she was fighting for herself. The sting of the past few weeks still lingered, but she channeled that pain into something powerful. She knew that the next few months would be critical. Her company was at a crossroads, and she had to make some tough decisions. But Ariana wasn't afraid anymore. She'd survived far worse. The first step was to reorganize the company's leadership team. There were still a few key players who had been loyal to her vision, and she needed them more than ever. She gathered her trusted executives for a meeting, determined to start fresh. Everyone, we've been through a lot lately, Ariana began, standing in front of the table. We've had setbacks. We've had people try to sabotage us. But I want you to know that we're not backing down. We are going to rebuild, stronger than before. And we're going to do it on our own terms. The team nodded, their eyes filled with determination. Ariana could see the spark of belief return in their faces, the fire that had fueled their early success. She wasn't alone in this fight. The following weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, strategies, and long nights. Ariana worked tirelessly to re-establish relationships with the investors, proving that her company had the potential to thrive, despite the challenges they had faced. Slowly but surely, the pieces began to fall back into place. But even as her business began to flourish again, Ariana knew that there were still things she needed to face. She had moved on from David, but there were still unresolved feelings lingering in the back of her mind. She couldn't ignore them forever. One evening, as Ariana was heading out of her office for the night, she received a call. It was David. Ariana, can we talk? Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't heard from him in weeks. The silence had been deafening, and as much as she had wanted to move forward, a part of her was still connected to him. I don't think we should talk right now, Ariana said, trying to keep her voice steady. I'm focused on other things. I need to keep moving forward. David's voice softened. I understand. But I just want you to know, I've been working on myself too. And I'll be here when you're ready. She didn't know how to respond to that. So, instead of saying anything else, she simply hung up. Ariana had made her decision. She had her own path to walk, and it was one that didn't include waiting around for someone else to catch up. Months passed, and Ariana's company was back on track. She had secured new partnerships, and the press had started to take notice of her resilience. The team was stronger than ever, and Ariana was beginning to believe that this was what she had worked for all along. But just as things seemed to be falling into place, the price of progress became apparent. The competition had only grown more fierce. A rival tech company, one that had once been an ally, began making moves to take over some of Ariana's market share. And the worst part? The new competitor was led by someone Ariana had once considered a friend, someone who had known the ins and outs of her company, someone who had all the inside information she could possibly want. Ariana had been blindsided. But she wasn't about to let it derail everything she had worked for. "I'm not going to let them win," she said to her team one morning, her voice full of determination. "We're going to fight back. And we're going to do it better than they ever expected." As the weeks went by, Ariana poured everything she had into staying ahead of the competition. She took risks, made bold moves, and refused to let the shadows of the past dictate her future. But deep down, she knew that there would always be a price to pay for success. The stakes had never been higher, and Ariana was ready to fight for what she had earned. No more compromises. No more backing down. Ariana had known the road to success would be tough, but nothing could have prepared her for the constant tension that came with running a business while navigating personal demons. Her company was finally back on track, but the competition had grown more cutthroat than she ever imagined. The rival company, led by her former ally, Derek Mitchell, had begun pulling some underhanded tricks. They were using her own strategies against her, and their aggressive marketing tactics were starting to lure away some of her clients. But Ariana wasn't about to let them win. If anything, their moves only fueled her desire to keep pushing. It was another late night in the office. The city skyline outside her window was a sea of lights, but inside the walls of her office, there was nothing but quiet focus. The glow of her computer screen illuminated her face as she reviewed her latest marketing campaign strategy. She had one goal in mind, to outsmart Derek. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced down at the message. "Ariana, we need to talk. I know we're both busy, but can we set a time? It's important." It was from David. He hadn't contacted her in weeks, and the message felt like an unexpected ripple in the calm. Despite her growing resolve, she still felt something when his name appeared on her screen. She sighed. She didn't have time to dig into the emotional mess of their past right now, but something in his message made her pause. Was he finally going to say the things she needed to hear? Her fingers hovered over her phone, and after a long moment of indecision, she typed back. "Fine. Let's meet tomorrow afternoon." Ariana stood outside the cafe, her heart pounding in her chest. She had agreed to meet David, but now that the time had come, she wasn't sure what she wanted to get out of it. She had spent so long trying to push him out of her mind, trying to focus on building her empire, that she wasn't sure if she still had the strength to confront him. David was already sitting at a corner table when she walked in. He looked up, his expression immediately softening. He stood when he saw her, a familiar warmth in his eyes. "Ariana, I'm glad you came," he said, his voice gentle. Ariana nodded, taking a seat across from him. "You said you wanted to talk. What is it?" David hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. About what happened between us. And about the way I treated you." Ariana crossed her arms, looking down at the table, her mind racing. "You mean the way you let your family control everything? The way you stood by as I was crushed by your mother's manipulation?" David flinched at her words, but he didn't look away. "Yes. I realize now that I failed you in so many ways. And I'm sorry." Ariana felt a sharp pang of frustration. It wasn't just about the apology anymore. "David, I'm not looking for apologies. I'm not even sure if I want your apology anymore. I needed you, and you weren't there for me. You chose your family. And for a while, I tried to make it work. But I can't keep waiting around for someone who doesn't know how to fight for me." David's face fell. "I understand. I've been a coward. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you until it was too late." "You weren't the only one hurting, David," Ariana said softly, her voice steady. "But I've moved on. I'm not the same person I was when I met you." I can't keep holding on to something that isn't healthy for me anymore. I need to keep moving forward, for myself. David opened his mouth to speak but stopped. He was finally quiet, absorbing her words. I'm sorry, David, Ariana continued. But I think we're done. For good. A long pause settled between them, neither of them willing to break the silence. David's face was a mixture of regret and pain, but Ariana had made her decision. She couldn't keep living in the shadow of their past mistakes. Finally, David nodded slowly. I can't change what happened. But I respect you for moving on. And I hope you find what you're looking for. Ariana felt a sense of finality settle in her chest. Thank you, she whispered, standing up. Goodbye, David. Ariana didn't feel the weight lift immediately, but as the days passed, she felt lighter. The decision to cut ties with David was one of the hardest things she'd ever done, but it was the right thing. She wasn't going to let the past hold her back anymore. She dove back into her work with a fierce energy, determined to take her company to new heights. Derek Mitchell's company might have been growing fast, but Ariana knew that with the right strategy, she could take him down. It wasn't just about proving her worth anymore, it was about showing the world, and herself, that she was more than capable of achieving greatness on her own. Her team was behind her, pushing forward with the same intensity. Ariana called a meeting with her top executives to discuss the next steps in their campaign. They had to think bigger than before, they had to outmaneuver Derek's company at every turn. We're going to push hard on social media, Ariana said, standing at the head of the table. We need to position ourselves as the innovative leader in this industry. Let's show the world that we are unstoppable. The team nodded, a renewed sense of energy and purpose fueling them. By the end of the week, Ariana's company had launched a new marketing campaign that was already drawing attention. They had taken advantage of the latest trends in AI and consumer tech, positioning themselves as the cutting-edge brand everyone would want to work with. The buzz was undeniable. Ariana stood in front of the boardroom, looking at the faces of the people who had supported her from the beginning. Her heart was full as she surveyed the room, her team was stronger than ever. It was time for their final push. We've done the work. Now, it's time to take everything we've built to the next level, Ariana said, her voice steady and filled with conviction. We're going to outwork the competition. We're going to innovate faster. And we're going to make sure every single person in this industry knows our name. There was a collective nod of agreement, and Ariana felt the weight of the last few months of uncertainty begin to shift into confidence. They had fought hard to get here, and now, they would finish what they started. As she looked around the room, she felt a deep sense of pride. She had come a long way from the woman who walked into the Harrison family's home, unsure of herself. She had fought for her place at the table, not just in the business world but in her own life. Ariana Wilson was no longer fighting for approval. She was fighting for her legacy. And she was winning. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Ariana's new marketing campaign had taken off, and the response from the market was nothing short of overwhelming. Her team was energized, the competition was on their heels, and even the press had begun to take notice. Ariana's company, once a contender, was now positioning itself as the industry leader. But with success came a new set of challenges. Derek Mitchell's company, though still a formidable rival, was now playing catch-up. His team had begun copying Ariana's strategy, trying to replicate her every move. But Ariana knew their efforts were futile. She had something they didn't, an unwavering vision for the future. Still, the pressure weighed on her. The stakes were higher than ever. She wasn't just fighting for her company anymore. She was fighting to secure her place in an industry dominated by men and massive corporations. Every decision felt more important than the last. Every mistake, more costly. One late afternoon, Ariana sat at her desk, her fingers lightly tapping on the keyboard as she reviewed the latest reports. The numbers were good, great, even. But there was a nagging feeling in the back of her mind. She couldn't shake the thought that something was still missing. The sound of a knock on her office door pulled her from her thoughts. She looked up to see Claire standing in the doorway, her expression serious. "We need to talk," Claire said. Ariana nodded and motioned for her to come in. "What's going on?" Claire closed the door behind her and took a seat. "It's about the competition. Derek's team has started making some aggressive moves. They've been targeting our clients, offering them lower rates, trying to undercut us at every turn. I've seen this before. They're trying to wear us down." Ariana's eyes narrowed. "How bad is it?" "Not terrible yet, but it's clear they're ramping up their efforts. If we don't act fast, we might lose a few key accounts." Ariana stood up, pushing her chair back with a sharp scrape. "We won't let that happen. I've fought too hard for this company, for everything we've built. We're going to show Derek that we're not just here to play. We're here to win." Claire nodded, visibly relieved by Ariana's confidence. "What's the plan?" Ariana walked to the window, looking out over the city. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the skyline. She took a deep breath. "It's time we make the first move. We're going to launch a new initiative, something so innovative that Derek won't be able to keep up. Let's set up a meeting with the investors. I want to lay out our vision for the next 5 years. And I want to do it now." Claire smiled, her energy matching Ariana's. "I'll start setting it up. We'll make sure everyone knows we're serious." The meeting with the investors was set for 2 days later, and Ariana was determined to make an impact. She knew this was more than just a typical boardroom discussion, it was a chance to prove that her company wasn't just a flash in the pan. It was the future. Ariana spent the next 48 hours preparing, refining her pitch, and making sure everything was in place. The pressure was building, but she thrived under it. She wasn't just fighting for her company anymore, she was fighting for her legacy. The day of the meeting, Ariana arrived early, her team already buzzing around her. Claire, Greg, and a few other executives were putting the finishing touches on the presentation, making sure every detail was perfect. Ariana took a moment to look at the slides one more time. Everything had to be flawless. This was their chance to secure the future, to outpace Derek once and for all. The investors slowly trickled in, taking their seats around the polished glass table. Ariana stood at the front of the room, her posture straight and her voice clear. "Good morning, everyone," she began. "Thank you for taking the time to meet with us today. We've been through a lot in the past year, but I can confidently say that we are on the verge of something incredible." She clicked the remote, and the first slide of the presentation illuminated the screen. "I'm not here to talk about our past," Ariana continued. "I'm here to talk about the future. We're about to launch a groundbreaking product that will change the way our industry operates. And it's going to set us apart from every competitor in this field, including Derek Mitchell's company." The room fell silent. Ariana could see the investors leaning forward, their attention fully on her. "This new initiative will leverage the latest in AI and automation, allowing us to streamline our services in a way that's never been done before. It will drastically cut costs, increase efficiency, and open new revenue streams. But most importantly, it's going to make us the clear leader in this space." She paused, letting the information sink in. The investors were nodding, whispering among themselves. Ariana had their attention, and she knew it. "We've already secured key partnerships to ensure that this product will have the reach it needs to succeed. And with your continued support, we'll be able to scale it faster than anyone else in the industry." Ariana clicked the remote again, and the final slide appeared, a sleek graph showing projected growth that far surpassed any of their competitors. "We're not just competing anymore," she said, her voice strong. "We're changing the game." The meeting was a success. The investors were impressed, excited, and ready to back Ariana's vision. The deals were made, the plans were set, and Ariana felt a surge of triumph as she walked out of the conference room. This was her moment. She had not only protected her company from the brink of disaster, but she had positioned them for future success. However, as Ariana walked back to her office, the weight of her success began to sink in. There was still a war to fight. Derek's company wouldn't back down easily. And the personal toll of everything she had been through, the separation from David, the strain on her relationships, the constant pressure, wasn't over. It wasn't over until she had the victory in hand. The next few days were a blur of meetings, calls, and strategy sessions. Ariana was on top of her game, pushing her team to work harder, smarter, and faster. Every move they made was calculated, every decision weighed with care. But even as the company thrived, Ariana couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The more she succeeded, the more she realized how isolated she had become. The people she cared about, her friends, her family, had been pushed aside in pursuit of her ambition. It was a price she had to pay, but at what cost? Her phone buzzed once again. It was a message from David. "Ariana, I know you're busy. I just wanted to check in. Let me know when you're free to talk." Ariana stared at the screen. She had worked so hard to get to this point, but could she really leave her past behind? Was it possible to move forward without ever looking back? She took a deep breath, and without thinking, typed back. "I'm free tomorrow. Let's talk." The next day, Ariana sat at her desk, reviewing the final approval for the new product launch. The energy in the office had shifted, with the team working tirelessly to implement their new strategy. Every member of her staff had become a driving force, pushing the company closer to its next big leap. But even with all the progress, Ariana felt a gnawing emptiness she couldn't ignore. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. She glanced at the screen. It was David. The message was simple. "Can we meet now?" She hesitated. It had been weeks since their last conversation, and though she had resolved to move on from their past, part of her still felt conflicted. She knew he was reaching out because of the emotional weight he carried, but could she risk opening those wounds again? Ariana took a deep breath and texted back. "Sure. I'll meet you in an hour." The cafe was crowded, the hum of conversation creating a familiar backdrop to the tension that sat between them. Ariana walked in, scanning the room until she saw David sitting at a corner table. He looked older somehow, more worn, as if the weight of the past few months had taken its toll on him. As she sat down, he didn't immediately speak. There was an unspoken understanding that both of them had a lot on their minds. David cleared his throat. "Ariana, I've been thinking a lot about everything. About what happened between us. And I can't keep pretending like I don't care." Ariana stared at him, her emotions more complicated than she had expected. "What do you want from me, David? I know I've hurt you. I've let you down more times than I can count. But I'm not the same person I was when we ended things. I've spent the last few months working on myself. I've realized that you were right about everything. I let my family control me. I let my fears dictate my choices. And I made the worst mistake of all, letting you go." Ariana's heart beat faster, but she remained steady. She had heard these words before. She had spent so long waiting for them, and yet, now that they were here, she wasn't sure they meant anything. "I don't need your apology, David," she said, her voice firm but not without some pain. "What I needed from you, I didn't get. And I can't keep living in the past, hoping for something that isn't there anymore." David's face fell, but he didn't back down. "I get it. I know you've moved on. I just wanted you to know that I'll always care for you, no matter what." Ariana looked away, trying to steady her breath. She didn't want to give in to the vulnerability she was feeling. "I've moved on, David. I've spent too long focused on fixing things that weren't mine to fix. I'm in a new place now, both in my career and in my life. And I have to keep moving forward. I can't keep looking back." David didn't argue. He simply nodded, as if finally accepting the truth that Ariana had known for a while. There was a quiet understanding between them, something that hadn't existed before. A respect, perhaps, for the path they had chosen. "I hope you find everything you're looking for, Ariana," he said, his voice sincere. "I really do." She stood up slowly, the weight of the conversation still hanging in the air. "I'm already on my way there, David. Thank you for everything, but this is goodbye." Ariana walked out of the cafe feeling lighter than she had in months. Saying goodbye to David had been hard, but it was necessary. She had given him the closure they both needed, and now, she could fully focus on the future. The next few days flew by in a blur of meetings, product launches, and strategy sessions. Ariana's company was thriving, and the new campaign was taking off faster than expected. But even with the victories, there was an underlying feeling that something was about to shift, something she couldn't predict. One afternoon, as Ariana reviewed some quarterly figures, her phone buzzed again. It was a news alert. She clicked it open. Tech industry leader Ariana Wilson faces new competition from rival Derek Mitchell's company as legal claims surface. Her heart sank as she read the headline. A series of legal claims had been filed against her company, accusing her of intellectual property theft. Derek Mitchell's company was behind it. It was the last thing she needed right now. Within minutes, her inbox was flooded with emails from her legal team, asking her to prepare for a hearing. The stakes were higher than ever, and the pressure to defend her company felt more intense than anything she'd faced before. The one thing she knew for sure. She wasn't going to let Derek take everything she had worked for. Ariana stood at the podium, her eyes scanning the room full of lawyers, board members, and media personnel. This was it, the legal battle that could make or break everything she had built. Derek Mitchell's accusations were bold, but Ariana was confident in her company's integrity. She knew the truth, and she was ready to fight for it. Her legal team had already outlined their defense, but Ariana was here to take control. This wasn't just about proving her innocence, it was about making a statement. She wasn't going to let Derek or anyone else undermine her success. "The accusations made against my company are completely baseless," Ariana began, her voice steady and clear. "Derek Mitchell is trying to tear us down because he can't compete with our innovation. These legal claims are nothing more than a distraction, and I won't stand for it." She paused for a moment, looking directly at the opposing side. Derek's cold stare met hers, but she wasn't intimidated. If anything, it fueled her resolve. "We've worked tirelessly to build a company founded on innovation, hard work, and respect for intellectual property. These claims will not stop us. We will continue to lead this industry." The room was quiet as Ariana's words resonated. The weight of the situation was heavy, but Ariana stood tall. This wasn't just a legal battle, it was a fight for everything she had built, everything she had fought for. The judge nodded, signaling that the hearing would continue. But Ariana knew one thing for sure, no matter the outcome, she had done what she came here to do. She had stood her ground. It had been a long week of court sessions, depositions, and high-stakes legal arguments. But finally, the day of the verdict arrived. Ariana stood outside the courtroom, surrounded by her legal team and a few trusted executives. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she refused to let the fear show. The door to the courtroom opened, and the judge stepped out. He cleared his throat and addressed the room. "The court has reviewed all evidence presented by both parties," he began. "And after careful consideration, the claims made by Mr. Derek Mitchell's company have been dismissed." Ariana felt a wave of relief wash over her. The room erupted in quiet applause, but she remained still, her eyes on the judge as he continued. However, the judge added, "The court advises that the parties resolve any future disputes through private mediation to avoid unnecessary litigation." Ariana's legal team let out a collective breath, but Ariana wasn't done. The fight might have been won, but she wasn't about to let her guard down. As she walked out of the courtroom, she met her team's eyes, a sense of triumph building inside her. She had fought for her company, and she had won. But the road ahead was still long, and she wasn't about to stop now. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Claire. "We've got this." "You did it, Ariana." Ariana smiled. Yes, she had done it. But there was still more to come. And she was ready. It had been 6 months since the legal battle with Derek Mitchell's company, and Ariana's life had changed dramatically. Her company had grown exponentially, the legal victory propelling her into the spotlight as one of the most resilient entrepreneurs in the industry. But despite the victories, Ariana had never felt so conflicted. On the surface, everything seemed perfect. Her business was booming, her reputation was unshakable, and her team was stronger than ever. But underneath, a part of her was still grappling with the personal cost of her success. She had sacrificed so much for her career, and sometimes, she wondered if it was all worth it. Ariana stood in her office, looking out over the city skyline as the sun began to set. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, but for the first time in months, Ariana didn't feel the sense of accomplishment that usually followed a victory. Instead, she felt the weight of everything she had left behind. Her phone buzzed, snapping her from her thoughts. It was Claire, her head of marketing and one of the few people Ariana trusted completely. "We need to talk. Can you meet me in the conference room in 10 minutes? Ariana frowned, but she trusted Claire. She grabbed her notebook and headed out of her office. Claire was already seated in the conference room when Ariana arrived. She looked serious, her brow furrowed with concern. "Ariana, I've been going over the projections for the next quarter, and something's off. Sales are steady, but there's a shift in the market that we can't ignore. Derek Mitchell's company isn't our biggest threat anymore," Claire began. Ariana raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "It's the emerging competitors. Smaller, more agile companies that are starting to move into our territory. They're taking a different approach, one that's catching people's attention." Ariana leaned forward, her interest piqued. "What are we missing? We need to diversify. We've been riding the wave of our initial product launch for too long. It's time for something new, something unexpected. But more importantly, we need to stay ahead of the curve. If we don't, these smaller players will catch up faster than we think." Ariana's mind raced. Claire was right. She had become so focused on the legal battles, the competition with Derek, that she had stopped thinking about what the next big move was going to be. It was time to pivot. "All right," Ariana said, her voice firm with resolve. "We're not just going to stay ahead. We're going to redefine the industry again. Let's brainstorm ideas. But we do this quickly, and we do it right. This is our next move." Claire smiled. "That's what I like to hear." For the next few weeks, Ariana and her team worked tirelessly on their new project. They had decided to launch a revolutionary service that would incorporate AI-driven solutions to personalize customer experiences in ways no other company had done before. It wasn't just about keeping up with the competition anymore, it was about setting a new standard for the industry. The pressure was immense. Ariana's mind was constantly running through the strategy, the logistics, the execution. She knew they were walking a fine line between success and failure. But she wasn't backing down. One night, as Ariana sat in her office, reviewing the latest numbers, her phone buzzed. It was a message from David. "I know we've both moved on, but I wanted to reach out. I'm proud of you. You've done amazing things. Just wanted you to know that." Ariana paused, reading the message twice. She had moved on, she was sure of that. But seeing his words made her realize how far she had come. She had let go of the past, and now she was living the life she had built for herself. With a deep breath, she replied simply, "Thank you, David. I'm grateful for everything." The message wasn't just about closure, it was a reminder of how far she had come. She had faced the hardest decisions of her life, and now she was standing on top. A few months later, the new product was ready for launch. Ariana stood before her team, giving them the final pep talk before the big reveal. "We've worked harder than I ever imagined," Ariana said, her voice filled with pride. And now, it's time to show the world what we've been working on. This isn't just about the product, it's about changing the way our industry operates. We're setting a new standard. The team applauded, and Ariana felt a deep sense of accomplishment. This was it. The final push. There were no more obstacles, no more distractions. She had built this company on her terms, and now, the world was about to see the results. The launch was nothing short of spectacular. It caught the attention of the media, investors, and competitors alike. Derek Mitchell's company, despite their aggressive efforts, couldn't keep up with the pace Ariana had set. The market was reacting, and Ariana knew they had struck gold. But as she stood at the front of the room, watching her team celebrate their success, she realized something. This wasn't just about beating Derek or outsmarting her competition. This was about proving to herself that she could overcome anything. That she could build something from nothing, and make it succeed. And she had. In the months that followed, Ariana's company continued to grow. She had positioned herself as a leader in the tech industry, not just through her innovations, but through her resilience. She had shown the world that success wasn't about playing it safe. It was about pushing boundaries, taking risks, and never backing down. But more than anything, Ariana had learned that true success wasn't just about the business, it was about the people you surrounded yourself with, the choices you made, and the path you carved out for yourself. As she sat in her office one evening, looking out at the skyline, Ariana smiled. She had fought for her place in the world, and now, she was exactly where she needed to be. She was no longer defined by her past, by anyone else's expectations, or by the battles she had fought. She was defined by her own choices, her own strength, and her unrelenting pursuit of her dreams. And that was the only thing that truly mattered.